and I'd just like to introduce Jennifer Merriman to talk to us today about specialist disability accommodation. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. And as Jan said, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. I'll share my PowerPoint presentation with all of you. And also, as Jan said, I've been working for the Summer Foundation for about 16 months now. And at the end of July, I also started working for Summer Housing. So they are two separate organisations. Although Summer Housing was born out of Summer Foundation, they are completely separate. They have their own separate boards, CEOs and staff. Summer Foundation, the work I do for them is part of the tenancy matching service team, finding applicants who may be eligible for SDA, looking for appropriate dwellings, and matching them up with an SDA provider that I happen to be working with, which is Summer Housing. So they are completely separate and they look after SDA in terms of the bricks and mortar, which I'll go into more detail as we go through the slides so that you can understand that. But happy to answer any questions for both. And if you're unsure, my details will be at the end. You can contact me about either or all. So I'll just stop sharing my face. You'll see my name on the screen, but I'll come back at the end. Yes, today we are talking about specialist disability accommodation and understanding your options around specialist disability accommodation. So our values at Summer Foundation are that we believe people with complex disabilities have inherent value for our society, and we're working hard to ensure that there is increased access to a range of housing and support options to enhance health and wellbeing and participation in the community. And the NDIS's approach to housing. So SDA is funded by the NDIS. In terms of housing, my role at the Summer Foundation is to assist people who are looking for SDA, seek that funding if they don't already have it in their plan. The NDIS can assist with daily living. They can assist a support coordinator to find a property. They can assist specialist tenancy support to manage a tenancy, home modifications to modify an existing dwelling, and separate to that is specialist disability accommodation. It is a separate bucket of funding, which I will go into more detail about as we go on. So specialist disability accommodation is the funding for the bricks and mortar for eligible NDIS participants who have an extreme functional impairment or very high person-to-person support needs, meaning that they're unable to live in mainstream housing. The NDIS believe this is only for around 6% of participants. Specialist disability accommodation is housing that has been specifically designed or modified to suit the needs of people who have an extreme functional impairment or very high person-to-person support needs. And SDA homes have special features to support the people with a disability to live more independently, safely, and to receive the supports that they need each day. So there's just a photo of one of our apartments that we have interstate. I'll have some more photos as we go along. In terms of SDA, you may have heard of it before or you may not have. If you're hearing of it for the first time, or even if you have heard of it but you're not quite sure what this means, it is a little confusing because it can be referred to in two different ways. One, SDA is the payment that you receive from the NDIS, or you are seeking it in your NDIS plan. So you might hear people say, I need SDA in my plan, or I have fully accessible SDA funding in my NDIS plan. And there are different levels of SDA funding, which I'll go into in more detail. Or you'll also hear about it as, that's an SDA high physical support dwelling, or I'm looking for an SDA improved livability house. It refers to the bricks and mortar. The SDA is the bricks and mortar. It's not the cost of your supports or your community access. It is just around that dwelling. So they are put into participants' plans based on an NDIS assessment. There is an SDA panel and they are now meeting weekly. I was under the impression that they used to meet monthly and then fortnightly, and I've just found out last week, the panel actually meet weekly to make the decision on who will receive SDA funding in their NDIS plan. There are two pathways to SDA. As you've heard me say, there is having an extreme functional impairment. There's also having very high person-to-person support needs. So you don't need, some people have both, or some just have one. So in terms of an extreme functional impairment, they are three categories of mobility, self-care, or self-management. And different levels of SDA design, which I will go into more detail, require either one or a couple of them. Some people may have an extreme functional impairment in all mobility, self-care and self-management. Some might just have an extreme functional impairment in mobility. The other is very high person-to-person support needs. Someone may have an extreme functional impairment and very high person-to-person support needs, or someone might just have very high person-to-person support needs, meaning they have at least a minimum of 5 to 6 hours of one-to-one support they require per day. Obviously going up from there, some people might require 24 hours of support per day. Some may even require 2 people for certain hours of the day, which will then bump that up to over 24 hours a day. Or say they require 4 hours of one-to-one support, but then they require another 4 hours of 2-to-1 support. So in total, they might have 8 hours of support funding they require a day. Extreme functional impairment. So what does that mean? And that in terms of the support that one requires in terms of getting out of bed, getting dressed, moving around, preparing meals, accessing the community. These are things that are set out in the SDA legislation that the NDIA have, which is actually accessible to all. I don't know whether Jan's got that on hand to send out to any of you who want it. Otherwise, I've got a link that I can send through to you if anyone wants to read the legislation, which is rather lengthy, but this is how we go about seeking SDA funding. We make sure that reports address the SDA legislation that the NDIS have set out in terms of an extreme functional impairment. So, for example, if a participant has an extreme functional impairment, the impairment results in extremely reduced functional capacity to undertake or psychosocial functioning in undertaking more than one of the following activities: mobility, self-care, and self-management. A participant has very high person-to-person support needs in undertaking the activity, even with assistive technology, equipment, or home modifications. So I know that's quite highfalutin, and I can actually explain that one-on-one or in further detail and break it down in plain, simple English, but I've just read out what the actual legislation is. So not everyone with a disability will be eligible for SDA. That's basically what I'm trying to get across here. It's something that please have a conversation with myself or your support coordinator or part of your team and your family. Have a conversation about, do you think I'll be eligible for SDA? And if you are in any doubt, just call me, just email me. I'm here for that. I actually don't come out of anyone's NDIS plan like a support coordinator would. I'm actually paid by Summer Foundation. I'm also paid by Summer Housing. But this type of work, if you're just wanting to know, actually, would I be eligible for SDA? Have a conversation with me about it and we can break it down and I can go through whether I believe you would be eligible or not. In saying that, I'll give you an example. I was speaking with an OT last week and she had got consent from her client to share the report she'd written, and before it's submitted to the NDIS, she just wanted me to have a look over it to make sure she was hitting the right mark to seek SDA funding. And I read this report and I don't believe the person would be eligible for SDA at all. And neither did the OT. And then she shared with me that at their last NDIS review, the NDIS said, have you thought of SDA? Why don't you apply for SDA? So even if I say, from everything that I've learned over the last 16 months of working for Summer Foundation, I don't actually think you'll be eligible because you're not quite hitting the mark for extreme functional impairment or very high person-to-person support needs. There is no harm in trying. If you've got a report from an OT that's gone into the great level of detail that they expect in terms of addressing the SDA legislation, then by all means submit it to the NDIS, because you never know. They may fund you, they may not. And I think it's something worth exploring. If that's what you're looking for, it is definitely worth exploring and having the conversation around. So the next slide is talking about very high person-to-person support needs. So this is that your informal supports, unpaid supports, for example, your family or friends can't meet your personal care needs, or it is not appropriate for them to provide these supports. So you're seeking external paid supports to assist you because you have such high support needs. You may have also spent a very long time in a group home or residential aged care, or they call it RAC for short, that's the acronym, RAC, RAC. It's another term for nursing home, if more of you are familiar with that term. And they usually, people who have spent a long time in RAC or in group homes have very high person-to-person support needs. Also, someone who may have behaviours that pose a risk to themselves or others, they have very high person-to-person support needs. Sorry, just moving on to the next slide now. So, for example, a person who does have very high person-to-person support needs might need assistance with their morning routine, lunchtime routine, evening routine, accessing the community. And as we're saying, rule of thumb is at least 5 to 6 hours of one-to-one support per day is what we are considering an extreme functional impairment in terms of self-care, self-management. They may need assistance showering, toileting, helping with the shopping. They may not be able to use money. They may need someone to manage their bills. There are different, everyone's different. So it's always worth checking and having a conversation about that. And these are just some pictures of SDA properties. So I'll go into a bit more detail now about the different levels of SDA funding. So the first level is basic design category. These are for existing housing only. So no new SDA dwellings will ever be a basic design category. It's used for those providers who already have group homes, people who are living in current group homes. Usually those built before 1 July 2016 are considered a basic design. And as I said, basic design SDA won't be built into the future. The next level is called improved sorry, I've missed that slide. I was talking about basic design. These are just some examples of some basic design category homes. Improved livability is the next design category, and it's for people who may have sensory, intellectual, or cognitive impairment. And the features of these improved livability dwellings, they'll be easy to enter and move around. Doorways and other features have easy access, good visibility from one room to the next, easily adapted to suit an individual's needs. It meets the livability housing standard of silver design category. And this category is for people who don't really need any unique design features. They won't have an extreme functional impairment in mobility and don't need strengthening features to keep them and other people safe. You'd be ambulant. You wouldn't be in a wheelchair if you required improved livability, and you wouldn't have behaviours of concern if you required improved livability. If you did have behaviours of concern, you would be looking for a robust design category. And as the name suggests, a robust design category is a robust build. It will be for people who have complex behaviours and sometimes might be at risk of harm to themselves or others. There would be adequate space and safeguards for the needs of the residents with complex behaviours to reduce the risk of residents hurting themselves or others. There would be secure windows and doors to the property and also within the dwelling. There would be impact-resistant walls, fitting and fixtures, so for example, really robust blinds and door handles, appropriate soundproofing to minimise the amount of noise passing from one area to another, laminated glass to avoid breakage, an area for the resident to go, like a breakout room, to avoid any harm to themselves, and also for staff or supports or family and friends who might be visiting. There'll be a room set aside that is a safe room if anyone needs to go into that space. And it also meets the Livable Housing Australian Standard guide. So this category is for people who need features that make the dwelling more resilient to damage and features that keep them and others safe. So you might think of someone and think, oh, their support needs of a design house is really important to keep them safe, and make sure that their support providers and workers are also kept safe as well. So they, feel secure, feel that they're not going to be in any harm because they know the dwelling has a safe space. They know the dwelling is robust enough in case someone accidentally breaks something, like they, attempting to break a window, it won't break. It's a robust design build. Right now, there is not a lot of robust design builds around, and that goes across Australia. But Summer Housing, who are an SDA provider here in the ACT, are very keen to come into the ACT and build robust. So that's something I would love to talk about down the track with people who may be interested in this design category, and if they think they're eligible, I'd love to have a conversation around that and see what Summer Housing can do in the ACT to assist. The next design category is called fully accessible. This is for people who require wider door frames and physical access because they are wheelchair users. So there will be no steps at external doors or internal external outdoor areas, so that the wheelchair can easily move around. Bathroom and vanity hand basins are accessible in a seated or standing position. There are power supplies to doors, windows, blinds. They can be retrofit for automation if necessary. It's not automatic that they would be set with that automation, because some people have great upper body strength and they want to use that capacity and continue on that path to make sure they regain that strength as much as possible, so that if they can reach the cords for the blinds and want to adjust those blinds, for daytime, nighttime, sun, that type of thing, they won't automatically be automated, but they can be automatically automated if the person wishes that to be done. Consideration is given to the kitchen sink, cooktop, meal preparation bench, and any key appliances such as dishwasher, oven, laundry appliances, to make sure that they're accessible in a seated or standing position. So, for example, the cooktop could be raised or lowered. So is the kitchen sink. Taps could be moved to be in a far more accessible spot instead of right at the back against the tiled sink wall, the splashback in the sink area. They could be moved around to the side or to the front if that's more accessible. And it also meets the Livable Housing Australia's Platinum Standard, which is the top design category. And in terms of SDA, the top design is called high physical support. So these are for people with significant physical impairment and who have a high level of personal support needs. So there are no steps, just like fully accessible. There are two main differences. Fully accessible, if you were going for a fully accessible design, or if you received SDA fully accessible funding in your NDIS plan, you would not require a ceiling hoist for transfers, and you may not require the level of smart technology that someone who's seeking high physical support, which is HPS for short, SDA HPS, they come with a reinforced ceiling to take the weight of a ceiling hoist, as well as smart technology, so that someone who may be non-verbal can access it, or someone who may have very poor fine motor skills can access the technology in terms of opening the doors, opening the blinds, shutting the doors, shutting the curtains, adjusting the heating and cooling. Whatever smart technology is required can be retrofitted for that person. So as I said, people who may be non-verbal, people who may have poor fine motor skills. Some people may need a sensor mat to let someone know that they need to let a carer into their apartment or their dwelling when they may not have a voice to be able to do so. They require that smart technology, and it's a great feature of the high physical support dwelling, SDA. It too, bathroom vanity hand basins are accessible. They can be moved up and down, especially for someone with high physical support needs. Most of them are in a wheelchair most of the time, but some may just be in a wheelchair outside of their dwelling, and so they are able to use They're able to stand but with assistance, so they might have a specially designed walker or standing frame. Need to make sure there is accessibility around that in terms of the kitchen and the bathroom, just as it is in fully accessible design. But one of the huge differences is the structural provision of a ceiling hoist, and that assistive technology is ready for your heating, cooling, household communication technology, video, intercom systems appropriate for the needs of the person. There is emergency power solutions to cater for a minimum of 2-hour outages where the welfare of the resident is at risk. There is 950mm minimum clear openings with doors to the dwelling and inside the dwelling, and it too meets the Livable Housing Australia Platinum standards. So how SDA works. It would be great if it actually really did look like this, but in terms of a PowerPoint presentation, this is the best I can do, but it doesn't necessarily go in this order. So just bear that in mind, which I'm sure you all know when you're dealing with the NDIS. Nothing usually goes to plan, but if it went to plan, this is really how it would look. You'd be identifying the need for a new housing. So someone could be thinking, right, I really want to move out of where I am. I've been living with my parents. I'm an adult now. I really want to move out. Or it could be someone who is in inappropriate housing and they say, right, that's it. I didn't actually want to be here. I was in hospital and I was giving the choice of that bed in that nursing home or that bed in that group home. And I took the best of the bad bunch, but that's actually not what I want. I want SDA. I want to find specialist disability accommodation for me. So it's starting with that goal around housing. What do you want? How does that look? Have a conversation with your support coordinator, your family, your supports about the fact that I really want to talk about housing when it comes to my next plan review. That's a main goal for me. Make sure it is a goal in your plan. The NDIS want to hear what people's goals are. Make sure you talk about housing. If that's something that's really important to you, make sure it is a very clear goal in your NDIS plan. The next step is to seek evidence around the types of housing that you want. So these can be assisted. You can have the assistance of your support coordinator, and you may have funding in your plan to do so already if it's something you've already talked about in terms of housing. And this will help you then seek out whether you're eligible for SDA, which is again determined by the NDIS, but a housing plan talks around what you're looking for in your housing. And then all this is assessed by the NDIS because they are the ones who make up their minds on whether they allow someone to be funded SDA or not. So I strongly recommend when you're developing your housing goals and developing the evidence around housing that you seek advice from an occupational therapist. And someone who might be listening today who doesn't have an occupational therapist, that's fine. It might be something you need to seek in your next NDIS review, funding for an OT. That OT is short for occupational therapist. And if you need any advice on occupational therapists in Canberra, I'm happy to give you the names of a few. I'm not able to recommend occupational therapists, but I'm definitely able to give you a list of names, numbers and email addresses. I deal with some excellent occupational therapists in the ACT and a number who are very knowledgeable and experienced on SDA and have had wonderful outcomes in terms of writing SDA reports for their clients, and they've been submitted to the NDIS with great outcomes. So I'm happy to help in that regard. As I said, the SDA funding will be given by the NDIA, so they will assess that process. As I said, the SDA panel at the NDIA now meets weekly. You will be searching for your new housing, and there are some different options I'll go into in the slides going on what this can look like. Once you've found the housing option that you think suits you, you'll then meet with that SDA provider, and there might be a tenancy agreement in place if it's a rental property. And if all goes to plan and you're signing on the dotted line, the NDIA makes that payment to the SDA provider. In terms of if it is a rental agreement, there is a rent component with an SDA property. And I can also go into more detail about that. I think it is in further slides, but just in terms of say, for example, an SDA property with summer housing, it is 25% of the disability support pension or the equivalent. Say, for example, you're on an income, or you may have a superannuation pension, or you have some other form of income, it'll still only be 25% of the equivalent of the DSP, that is the disability support pension. So as I said, when accessing the NDIS, when seeking SDA funding and you're accessing SDA, the first steps are to have the capacity building funding from the NDIS to search for suitable housing and to write a housing plan. That's the way to find out whether you're eligible for an SDA payment. It can be funded under your, however you fund your support coordinator, or it can be funded under your therapy bucket if an OT is writing that report. But as I said, I don't come out of anyone's NDIS planner, so if you want to have conversations about it, I am more than happy to help you on this path so that then you can tick off your list, well, actually, am I eligible? There are other buckets of funding before going down the SDA path in terms of the NDIS, and one is called exploring housing options. So that might be something that you want to look at in your next plan. If that's a goal that you have around housing, you can have funds specifically for exploring what is out there, how do I go about it, what sort of reports do I need? So make sure you have a conversation next time you're speaking with your support coordinator or your family and friends around housing to see whether you can seek that level of funding. If you are currently in unsuitable housing, and that includes a group home, nursing home, I'm sure there are other very unsuitable dwellings out there, then the capacity building funding from the NDIS is a way to search for more suitable housing, including existing and new SDA developments. And you and your support coordinator or your family and friends can use the NDIS capacity building fund to search for appropriate mainstream housing. Maybe if that's more appropriate than SDA, you may seek private rental, or you may seek ACT housing. Again, these are things that are not SDA, but the NDIS are going to want to know that you've exhausted all your options before seeking SDA funding. So again, good conversation to have with your support coordinator to see, have I exhausted all my options first? And if so, I really want to look at SDA because I've looked at everything else, nothing else is suitable, or I've tried it. You may have lived in a group home for, I don't know, a few months, 12 months, 18 months and gone, this isn't what I want. This isn't right for me. I don't want to live this way anymore. I really would like to seek SDA funding. And when you're seeking SDA funding, it comes in those different design categories. So in terms of, will I be eligible for high physical support? Will I be eligible for fully accessible or robust or improved livability? And within those design categories, the NDIA have set a price guide around SDA. So there are different prices if you were seeking SDA funding to live alone with appropriate supports in an apartment. That is a different level of funding if you were seeking SDA to live in a shared house with 3-4 other people. It is a different level of funding. It is not something that an SDA provider sets. It is a price guide that the NDIA sets. So I'm sure Jan or if any of you are out there Googling, you can have a look at the price guide that is specifically around SDA. And if you need any help with that, please just get in contact. I'm happy to help you and flick you that. So some tips when going through the process of seeking SDA. My number one tip is get the right support coordinator. And I should have added to that too, is get the right occupational therapist. And that's not to say that there aren't great support coordinators out there and great OTs, but some of them have never dealt with SDA before. And some of them aren't willing to deal with SDA. I've come across a few OTs who actually really don't want anything to do with SDA. And that's their choice. That's their business. And if they're used to doing something like, for example, just assistive technology in terms of scripting for wheelchairs or shower commodes, or maybe they just want to do home modifications, they don't want to go down the path of SDA, that's fine. But I'm here to help with that. Part of what the Summer Foundation does is we are very happy to give feedback on anyone who's written an SDA report to make sure that it is hitting the mark, that before it is submitted to the NDIS, we want to make sure that the correct wording is in there, that it is addressing the SDA legislation, that is using words like extreme functional impairment. They are the words that the NDIA have written in terms of SDA legislation. So it's a bit like doing a selection criteria if you're applying for a job. You need to make sure you're addressing the selection criteria. In this instance, you need to make sure you're addressing the SDA legislation. And so getting the right support coordinator, getting the right allied health professionals to help you on this journey is a great start. Number 2, working out how you really want to live. Think about that. Think about, what do I want? Not what someone else wants for you. What do you want? And really nut that out. I want to live with someone, but I don't want that person to have a disability. I've already got a disability. I want to live with someone who doesn't. Or you may want to live with someone who does have a disability. You may want to live alone with appropriate supports very close by, but not in your actual dwelling 24 hours a day. You want to have that independence to know this is my home, not somebody else's. But I'd really like to know that someone is there in case of an emergency or any unplanned time when I don't have my supports with me. You may decide, well, actually, I want to live in a townhouse. I don't want to live in an apartment. I don't want to live in a house because I don't want a big garden to look after. Or you might think, yeah, I want to live in a group home. I want to live with 3 or 4 other people and I want to have a backyard. I want to be able to, have my dog live with me or my cat, or, you might even want to live in an apartment with a pet, and you might want to think, well, is that doable? Can I get an apartment and have my pet live with me as well? All really great, valid points to consider and start that conversation. Third point is use the Housing Hub to explore what's around. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the Housing Hub. It's a website that was born from the Summer Foundation. We've just released version 3, so it looks quite different if you haven't had a look at it in a while. I will say I am a little disappointed. There are not many ACT dwellings on there right now, but we're hoping to fix that soon. Anyone can advertise on there. So if someone's got a house or a townhouse or an apartment, any sort of dwelling they've got for sale that they believe is accessible, does not have to be SDA. Please advertise on there. And right now it is actually free to advertise on there. If you've got a place to rent that's accessible, I mean, you might have grab rails, you might have a ramp, you might have a really robust design build with soundproofing. Advertise on the Housing Hub, whether it's be to buy or to sell. You will also see some new properties on there, some summer housing properties that we have in the ACT. Also, other organisations are advertising if they've got group homes, shared accommodation, whatever it might be. A SIL provider might advertise. It doesn't necessarily have to be SDA, but it's just to have a look, get you thinking, well, this is what's out there at the moment. But you also have the opportunity to actually register your details on there. You might not like anything that's on there. That's not what you want. What you want is something different. Then you have the opportunity to register your name and details and put in what you're actually looking for. An alert will come back to you if something fitting the build comes back. So in a few months' time or a year's time down the track, you may get an alert going, oh, thank you for registering as a participant on the Housing Hub. We have a new development in the ACT that is ticking some of the criteria that you selected that you might be interested to know about. So please do take the time to go and look at the Housing Hub. I've got some more slides in the future going forward that shows you exactly how to access that. And the fourth point is, remember that you're the one with the choice and control in the market. We might not have something that you're looking for right now in terms of SDA, but it is very powerful to have SDA funding in your NDIS plan, because you cut through all that red tape when you do find the appropriate SDA dwelling you're looking for. You can come prepared and say, yes, I have the SDA funding. And that is fantastic, because most of the people that I've been dealing with that don't have the SDA funding, but they may have found the dwelling. So we're going through the long process of seeking the SDA funding from the NDIS. It is doable, but it is just a longer process. So just bear that in mind. So some more top tips. So housing needs and preferences. I mean, this is really important. It's ensuring that a person's housing and support needs and preferences are articulated and indicate where the person wants to live. As I said, if they want to live alone or with another person, that's really important that we voice those. Having the evidence to address the eligibility requirements. Include and reference the SDA legislation. Include standardised assessments to demonstrate functional impairment and support needs. And this will determine the SDA response that you receive from the NDIS. The Summer Foundation have a great website. In case you haven't had a look, I highly recommend you have a look at it. They have a lot of free resources online, and this is just one of them that I'm showing you, but there are a lot of great resources. This one's called How to Write a Housing Plan Guide. It is just a guide. It is free. There is a template there that can help you write a housing plan, help your support coordinator, help your allied health professionals write it. I know many of the OTs that I deal with have said this is fantastic, and they have used the template and they continue to use it when writing housing plans for their clients. When you're talking about the people you want to work with, contact me. As I said, I'm more than happy to help talk you through the eligibility criteria, advise you on the next steps. When you're applying for SDA, talk about options that are out there, talk about the Housing Hub, register your name on there. It's a database so that you can tick the types of things. You may be familiar with allhomes.com.au, which is, you know, an ACT website for people who are looking to buy or rent in the ACT. We're trying to do that with the Housing Hub. So say you were looking for a particular property and you want 3 bedrooms, you want 2 bathrooms, you can tick those boxes and then it will create a database of what you're looking for. The other things that I'm going to mention that we do, and this is more in terms of for support coordinators and allied health professionals, but you may be able to pass this message on to your support coordinator and allied health OTs, speeches, physiotherapists, is a course called Upskill. I'm just liaising with my colleagues at Summer Foundation at the moment about bringing Upskill to the ACT. I'm also talking with the Office for Disability about hopefully getting some funding to run this in the ACT. So this has been a very successful Summer Foundation program that's been run across Australia. The only jurisdiction it hasn't been run is the ACT, and it is very much needed for support coordinators and allied health professionals to assist them in terms of SDA so that they feel more confident when they've got their participants and their clients that they know what SDA is all about. So watch this space. I will definitely keep Jan informed. We're hoping to run about 3 or 4 sessions later this year, hoping for November, fingers crossed, but I'm still teeing that up at this time. And anyone who wants to come is more than welcome. But I will say it is very much aimed at support coordinators and allied health professionals in helping you on your housing journey. As I said, there's the Housing Hub. This is what it looks like when you go online, and this is one of our participants who's living in her SDA dwelling, who's happy to have her photo taken and be promoted on our Housing Hub website. So if you're looking for a home, please go on, register, have a look what's there. You don't have to register straight away, just go on and have a look, and you can see that you can search to rent or to buy. You can search by state, suburb or postcode, because that's really important in the ACT. Do you want to live north side or south side? I'm constantly telling my colleagues interstate that that's a real thing here in the ACT, what side of the lake you want to live on. And I get that, especially when you're looking for somewhere close to what you know and like. Your family, your friends, your work, where you volunteer, where your occupational therapists are, where your GPs are. That's all really important when you're looking for somewhere to live. But you might want to live somewhere completely different where you've never been before, and that's great too. It's all about your choice and control. So as I said, Housing Hub is for housing seekers, people with a disability, looking for housing options, what current vacancies are out there. It too has a lot of information and resources on the website. And as I said, not just SDA, there are non-SDA properties on there as well. And what we do in terms of the Summer Foundation, I think I've said that before, but I'll just say it again. We work with SDA providers to assist them in connecting them with suitable tenants for their housing. So as I said, I work for Summer Foundation as part of the tenancy matching team. I find people who are interested in SDA who would like to apply for SDA properties. sorry, I did not change that. I was giving a presentation on Sydney and I can just see that. Oh no, you can't see that. That's great. Here's an example of an SDA property in the ACT. Sorry, I thought I was going to throw up a Sydney one. Just to let you know, we are across Australia. Right now, the only two areas we don't have properties in are the Northern Territory and Tasmania, but we're really hoping that SDA providers come into that space, as well as come into the space here in the ACT and build in all the 4 different design categories. Right now, the one you can see on the screen are the Grand Central Towers in Woden. They're an SDA high physical support development of apartments. There are 10 apartments peppered throughout this mainstream apartment building. They are for people with, as I said, high physical support needs. They require, they're wheelchair users. They require usually a ceiling hoist for transfers, or they may do in the future. If they have a progressive disability, they may not require one right now, but going forward, you never know. It may be a safer option in terms of transferring to use a ceiling hoist. The Grand Central Towers are located right in the heart of Woden. They are next door to the Woden bus interchange. They are right next door to the Woden Westfield. If you know the Hellenic Club in Woden, there's a big car park next to the Hellenic Club. At the end of that car park is the construction going up right now. They are due for completion in 2021. And a pool. There's a beautiful pool at the Grand Central Towers, which I've been talking with the developers about making sure that is accessible for people with a disability. This is the SDA provider, in this case, is Summer Housing. As you can see, their symbol is on the screen. The one good thing, there's many good things Summer Housing do, but one thing they do very different to other SDA providers is that all their dwellings come with fire sprinklers, not just smoke detectors. They do come with fire sprinklers. So I know that's not standard, but that is a requirement that Summer Housing have said they will always have their dwellings with fire sprinklers. The beautiful thing about Summer Housing properties is that they like people to bring their own supports. So when you're in your own dwelling, in this case an apartment, you have your own supports. It's your own choice and control around that. It is not something Summer Foundation or Summer Housing get involved with. If you are very happy with your current supports, then by all means, bring them along and have them in your own dwelling. It is called a 10+1 model because the +1 is an 11th apartment, which we call the concierge. In that model, the concierge is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide support to you in terms of an emergency, any unplanned supports when you may be alone, when you don't have your core supports with you or don't have any family or friends with you. Say you drop a drink or you drop your iPad or you need to go to the bathroom, but you're alone and you need support. You can call on the concierge apartment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to come and assist you. Say, for example, you do have your core supports with your family and your friends, but you require 2 people to transfer. You can call on the concierge to come up and be that second person for support. And yes, any more questions that you may have around SDA, around whether you're eligible, any questions about anything I've asked you about today, please get in touch. That's my name, my phone number, and my email address. My email address at Summer Housing is just jennifer.merriman@summerhousing.org.au, but I'm on both, I answer to both, and my mobile phone number is exactly the same. So I'm hoping that I've given you some food for thought today. Also, again, some templates just to show you what they look like on the Summer Foundation website. Please go and have a look. Some really great templates and great guides there to help you. And yes, we're on social media, all those channels. So like us, join us, ask questions, look at photos. There's also great video footage of people actually living in their SDA dwellings. There's also footage of carers, so families, parents who give their perspective on what it's like when their adult child is moving into SDA for the first time, because it can be very daunting for everyone involved. It's new, it's a transition, it's full of change, and it can be really hard for some people to let go. But it's fantastic to watch this video footage and hear from them what it's like for them as a parent, letting go for that very first time and seeing their adult child absolutely embrace this newfound independence of their living.